Welcome to podcast number 6 for Opening Day Sportsman. And today's heading for this podcast is proposed legislation by House of Representatives Brian Smith. And Randy's going to start out and we're going to kind of get everybody up to speed with where things stand. We're going to kind of do a year-end review today to go over some key talking points and and talk about some of the social media posts, negative and positive, about what's been going on over the last month. I want to say that Randy and I both are very grateful for all the support that we've been getting, and our growth has continued to move upward, and the support continues to grow. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Randy, and he's going to talk a little more in depth about the legislation to support the Monday return of the opener.
Okay. Good to be with everyone again. Here we are, number 6, and every week or two, this thing changes. And of course, we're out here trying to keep everybody up to date on what's going on and to bring the information forward. The last podcast, I think we did, there was this legislation from Representative Brian Smith was not at that time proposed. It's currently, the memorandum has been sent out, and it will be shortly getting a bill number. And of course, then the co-sponsorship aspects start to come into play and so forth. But when I met and talked to Representative Smith here a few weeks ago, after he introduced this, it once again became obvious, because this is an individual that I did not have any previous contact with, but within 10 minutes of a conversation, it's like we've known each other for years. The topics that surround this are that cemented. They're so recognized, and him and Representative Ryan Warner, have a Brian and a Ryan, had also contacted me, and he is of the, he had the same experiences in his travels. Legislators are hearing a lot about this, and this legislation that's proposed is a very, very, I think, very intelligent way to approach this. We had talked about introducing a Sunday early on this. Well, as the structure is right now, the Saturday opener, it allows for 14 days of hunting and 4 weekend days, the Saturday, Sunday, and the 2 Saturdays. The new legislation that's proposed is to put back the Monday, which brings in all the societal benefits with it that we've been talking about, economics, these fundraising events, so forth. And it also gives 4 weekend days, the same amount of weekend days as now. And in fact, this is a 14-day continuous run, which would include a Saturday, Sunday, Saturday, Sunday. Now, the second Sunday would have to be approved and or moved from one of the other two, Bear or something. But the legislation, as it stands, is getting very much acceptance, because it's not taking any hunting time away. It's restoring what we've all been talking about as being probably the biggest problem, is the things that this has done, not only with the traditions, that's a part of it, certainly, but the biggest stuff is I think the big picture. You can't really single out any one thing that's not important. Economics, these groups upstate, the nonprofit groups that utilize that weekend, and it's unfortunate that Dan and I butt heads with a lot of Saturday supporters that don't understand that aspect of this, because they may not hunt those areas, they may not. But we're talking about counties in the northern part of our state that have more seasonal and hunting camps in their county than they do permanent residences. So think about that for a minute. So for those that don't think that the hunting influx makes a difference in a particular time of year, this is something that's been identified not just by us. This has been identified, I think I mentioned back, Cameron County Chamber of Commerce executive director sent some letters out regarding this, that their population explodes that weekend. And now with the, for those of you that may still not get that, I mean, those of us that do, that's when you got to rush Friday and get someplace to be ready to hunt before daylight Saturday. That weekend patronization of businesses is now gone. Very little. You get some on Friday, and but basically 2/3 of it was put in jeopardy, and the resulting impacts from that are very, very tangible. They've been identified to the point where senators that I've spoken to who were on the fence on this originally weren't sure, have now stated to me that they are inclined to go along with the fact that yes, this has caused a lot of problems. So, that is all. And of course, when you talk to some of the guys on the other side of the bank, I'm making this all up. Well, you'll see. Uh, as this moves forward with the legislation, when it gets a bill number, and as we see the co-sponsorship build. But at any rate, we wanted to touch on some of those parameters today, bringing this to legislation to everybody's attention. And I would just want to caution one thing with everyone here. Legislative input in the Game Commission is something that was not supported by many people ever, including myself to some degree. The biological aspects of what they do in fish and game are outside of the acumen of many legislators. In other words, we shouldn't be having politicians making decisions that are biologically based from these agencies. And going way back when the Independent Regulatory Review Commission was set up, fish and game were precluded from those oversight. So that kind of set the standard right there that their work was not to be, lack of a better term, messed with from a biological standpoint. Sure, input still comes from the legislators. That's important to help with their decisions. But this particular legislation, what makes this different is when the Game Commission brought this to be, they clearly identified that this was a social decision having nothing to do with deer management or biological aspects. So that throws it right squarely in the court of the people we elect to take care of social aspects in our state. So keep that in mind, that although this is a legislated situation, it's not going to propose or begin a groundswell of legislative aspects that have anything to do with biological things that we all may be concerned about. That's not going to happen from this. This is strictly due to the social aspects. So,
Randy, can I interject?
Sure.
We've provided some YouTube videos on our Facebook page that we encourage everybody to look at the actual meeting. And in talking to a number of the commissioners, they clearly said, hey, we're not concerned about economics. That's where the problem is. The problem here is that in itself. Legislators don't handle the biological aspect of it, and the commissioners don't seem to care about the economics part of it. But when you go look at Burhan's annual report to the legislators, the hunting industry brings in $1.4 billion. Now, Randy and I do not have we don't have the finances to handle a survey of economic impacts that would have been done by this move. We did contact a couple of state schools, and that possibly could happen down the road, but to this date, we don't have a survey as to what exactly the number is that was affected. It's a big number, people. I'm talking millions of dollars. So I just wanted to interject that, Randy. So keep going.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dan, because the people sitting out there, hunters, that are not concerned about economics or not concerned about these fundraising events. Let's put it into a more real world position. Let's just say, let's just skip to the nonprofits just for a second. I have an individual who's going to get involved with us now. And I think I may have mentioned this prior. He's a chief up at I think it's Cherry Grove. It's up north from my camp. Excuse me if I have that incorrect, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. His name's Mike Barr, and Mike had told me early on after the first opener that this has. He called me. He reached out to me. I didn't even know the gentleman, and he said, we cannot. He said, I have a responsibility to this community. He said, we cannot afford to lose this kind of money. And what he went on to talk in the conversation is this money, people, is used for these volunteer groups to provide services for you and me, for the community, particularly in the fire department's case, that's used a lot of times for additional or upgraded safety equipment, um, not to mention basic firefighting equipment. I was a volunteer fireman when I was a young man. I get it. I mean, I was involved in that world, and it's definitely something that's an important. A lot of these little departments scratch and scrape for revenue, and if they can hold their and I go back to what I said before, these little towns have low population, have more camps and seasonal homes. So that balloon that happened that weekend, they took advantage of. They would put butts in the seats, so to speak, so much easier than they did when they had just their local residents there. So that's the side of this regarding fundraising events. If it's a church, if it's an ambulance service, if it's all of that aspect. And to think it's not important, there's no other weekend like that they can tap upon to get the amount of sportsmen and people into these events. Sure, you get some decent situations around trot season, but again, trot season starts on Saturday. See, it's a different situation when we had the Monday. It created that time. And with this legislation now that we're not taking away anything, we're keeping the same amount of weekend days. And here's kind of the last part of this, and I think Dan and I we've talked about this ad nauseum. It's funny how Dan, I'll let you go ahead. Why don't you take this regarding the Saturday supporters that want us to wait till Monday?
Sure. Well, let me just interject something here, Randy. One of the differences between a trout opener and a post Thanksgiving Day opener on Monday or Saturday is that Easter moves. Thanksgiving
is always the same day.
It is tied to that Thanksgiving. Yeah, that's it. And I think just this year or last year, they now changed the opener for trout to the first Saturday in April, if I'm not mistaken. So, and before they actually had it split up, where the southern part of the state was one weekend and then the other. So you actually could have two openers depending on, or you could attend two openers on different streams. So, again, you can't compare the two. It's totally different. This one is tied to Thanksgiving, and that in itself is where the problem became evident when they started looking into this. And again, it all started with Lachlan and the introduction of the Sunday hunting is when this started to become a reality that they might look at that this might be a good idea without doing the homework. And we have many posts, people that are adamant against us, Randy and I, and our movement and our supporters, is that, well, hey, no problem. You guys can just wait till Monday to hunt. Okay. And we're saying, no problem. You guys wait till the first Saturday to hunt. So the two cancel out each other. That has no merit, and it's not something that we're going to consider because of the peripheral damages that have been done to all the other tangible items that were affected. You can't move over 500,000 people and not have it have a detrimental effect economically.
Your point there is excellent. We've talked about this, but the difference there is to try to clarify that the Saturdays people that say wait till Monday. Okay, let's say we waited till Monday. That does zero to help the economic and all the other things that were taken away with the Monday. If they wait till the first Saturday and the Monday's reinstated, all of the things that we're talking about that are very real in a big portion of the state, the economics, these events, the family time that people are frustrated with, that they're running out of the house, Thursday evening, Fridays, don't have the time, whether it be travel, whether it be finish up with relatives at home, that is there. That's for real. So if you go to the second portion, like what Dan said, if the Saturday supporters wait till the first Saturday with this Saturday, Sunday, having all these 4 weekend days, that does correct these economics. So it brings this thing together as a whole, where their position on this does nothing for what we have, basically for what the legislation is wrote for. If you look at Mr. Representative Smith's legislation, he said something to the effect of he wants to bring back the harmony between the hunters and the communities and the businesses in the state. That's the intent of the legislation. And at the same time, well, buddy wants to say, well, what about hunting? Well, license sales didn't go up. Used sales kept going down. The 3 years at this and going into 4 years now showed that it wasn't beneficial to the sport regarding hunting. So when you look at the big picture, the legislation makes a lot of sense. And, we're just sharing some of this today with a lot of people that know and don't know how this plays out.
Right. And to throw something else out there, to many people, we've had numerous articles running across the state. One of them was picked up, and of course, they interjected their viewpoint, and that was the Lancaster paper. I think beat writer Raleigh, and his comment was, hey, they did a survey after the 3 years were up. And well, which survey do you go with then? The survey of 2008 people that they ran, that they controlled the questions and the narrative to support what their decision to move the Monday opener back to Saturday? Or do you go to the 2019, which was a much more comprehensive study done by numerous staff people inside the Pennsylvania Game Commission? And that clearly showed that it was not supported to move the opener to Saturday. And so that dispels.
If you're bringing in that survey numbers, that's a good point, Dan, because, let's talk about that just briefly. We've talked about the survey before, but, the survey was of 2,008 hunters, 2008. Well, we sold 840 some thousand various general licenses that year. So you're surveying 208 out of a massive number. First, it puts a big question mark in it, number one. Okay, well, then let's fast forward. Let's go backwards a little, then fast forward. 2017, the hunter survey that was done had a 65% opposition to changing the opener. Okay, there's a survey. There's a valid Game Commission survey that said don't do this. You have their little survey of 2,008 hunters. Okay, let's say that. Okay, there's there. Now let's go to 2022. The Senate Game and Fisheries just did that survey that people were contacting. It was done on their Facebook page. The results of that, after roughly 9,500 hunters contacted and voted in that survey, it came back 58% supporting the Monday and 41% supporting the Saturday. So there's another survey. There was a survey done up in a small paper called Explore Clarion recently. This was in the last 2-3 weeks. It came back, I think, 60 or 65% for the Monday, 35% for the Saturday. So if you want to look at a survey, I think you better look at a lot of surveys to see that one that seems to be out of step with things that we're seeing today. I think a lot more hunters today have recognized that this didn't work, and legislators that were on the fence are now on our side on this. So when you look at the big picture, if you want to just grab a hold of that one small bite, that's fine. But that small of a survey out of that many hunters, so you can't just lean on the one. You have to give credence to all of them. So I think that shows how divisive, and that's the sad part about this, and I think I brought this up in the last podcast. This decision was such a bad decision. If we would have just put an extra day or two in the next couple of weekends for these guys that don't go to the Monday, they would have been happy. This thing would have rolled. We wouldn't have hurt people for 3 years, and that's where we're at now, having to force this back from where it was changed.
And they already had a mentoring day that they added before the hunting season opened. So for people that say that we're against youth, no, we're not. We are not against the youth getting involved. All of us, me, I have four boys. and I've taught them all. Hunting families make it work. That's what Pennsylvania is all about. That's what makes Pennsylvania unique. And let me interject this, Randy. I think this is really important. Senator Laughlin chairs the Senate Game and Fisheries Committee. Going through looking at all the different things that he was involved in, he felt it was important enough for Erie to do an economic impact study about the fishing industry in Erie. Well, how is that not comparable to the hunting industry? And why didn't he say, hey, before we go down this rabbit hole, let's take a look at economically how this is going to impact Pennsylvania? And he didn't do that. They didn't do that, and they went along with their personal preferences, which is very evident when you watch the working group video that's on our Facebook page.
And I'm not going to get into specifics, but the sad part of this is a lot of the other group that's opposing us. They have had a propensity to want to continue to insult our older hunters, to insult me. I brought this up on the last podcast, and Dan, and I just can't understand the aspect of Senator Laughlin aligning with that group, commenting on that group, suggesting things for them to grow their membership, putting in false statements about me, things that he has fabricated that I said that never happened. I can prove all this. And there's others that are supporting this Saturday that have said things. And I'll give you a quick example. A gentleman by the name of Harold Daub, who was the past executive director of the Federation. And years back, the Game Commission, when they started the Mentored Youth Program, they did not have a cutoff date on issuing the big game tags with these mentor licenses. Well, there was a concern about it, and the Game Commission was proposing a cutoff date a year for kids 6 years old and below. And we supported that. I supported that because we don't need the things that come along with giving a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old a big game tag. Does common sense not live anywhere in some of these organizations that pushed back against me and the Game Commission at that time to not see that, okay, 6 years and up is plenty old enough to be able to deal with a big game tag if you feel like you want to with your mentor? But that aspect where my concern came in, it wasn't the fact that some hunters might be abusing it. There was some talk, a guy has a 2-year-old kid, he gets a mentor license, he gets another big game tag. That wasn't our concern. The concern was, what if we have an accident regarding one of these essentially toddlers, infants, you could say, that are, because a big game tag comes through for a 2-year-old, could be in diapers yet. So this made a lot of sense for us as hunters to have a cutoff point on when we give these big game tags. Ever since that date, I have been disparaged as against youth mentoring. That's what it's all about. So if they want to ride that wave about me that I'm against youth mentoring because I stood up for a common sense position that was the best that I felt, as did our organization at that time, I was speaking for Unified Sportsmen. We're not Unified Sportsmen here. Dan and I are on our own here. But when you have a situation that potentially having an accident, having something happen, and now you're going to have the news media sticking the mic in the face of the executive director of the Game Commission saying, you mean you give big game tags to 3-year-olds? Well, I'm going to leave it at that. But I'm not going to go and address other aspects that I have been accused of, but I just wanted to bring this one out, how they play the game. That they're trying to tear us down, Dan and I, publicly, to make it look like our cause is not just, that we're not relevant.
Or it's self-serving, and it's not. Yeah, no, not even a little bit. To be honest with you, it isn't about killing a deer. It's about doing what's right, and it's about correcting a wrong. There was a major misstep on the Pennsylvania Game Commissioner's part, and they've got to take ownership in that. If you really look at the details of how this started and who brought it to the table with Jim Daly, Jim Daly bringing it, and then realizing after looking at the data, oh boy, this is not going to be good, and I can't support it. And he's the fellow that brought the bill or brought this legislation change, or I'm sorry, regulation change to the table. And boy, did he not get hung out to dry after that. They made an example out of him. This is a group of individuals that need to reevaluate how they make decisions so that things like this don't happen again. This is a big deal. And to prove the point, here we are 4 years later, and look at the amount of people that are involved in it. I mean, it definitely has kind of given a black eye to the Pennsylvania Game Commission. And
I'd like to interject some here too. I have, there's unfortunately, it's the board now consists of 9 board members. Some of the ones that were involved in this decision are now gone. And in all fairness, there are 4 new commissioners that are on the board, which I've had a brief contact with, have been very cordial. Everything seems to be very on the up and up. No, everything's good. And I just want to clarify, some of these newer commissioners were not involved in this. Their position on this now is being developed on what is being presented to them from the backstory and the history and where things are today. So, I just want to be fair to those commissioners, the new ones particularly, and moving forward when we refer to the board, let's just, Dan and I need to be clear that there's still some on that board that were involved in this, yes, but there's also 4 new ones that were not. So I just want to, we want to be fair about that. And the whole issue here too is when Dan and I talked about the economics, and guys said, well, we don't care about economics. This is about hunting. Guys, you got to understand something. Hunting economics. In fact, there's a group called Hunting Works for Pennsylvania. Remember that. Google it. Look at the economic data provided from that organization, how much impact Pennsylvania hunting has on the state. And what that does for us as sportsmen, fellas and ladies, is when we wield that much power with economics, that helps our sport stay intact where it's at. Legislators can use that clout, if you will, from the economic side of things to support, hey, this is good for the state, it's good for our economy, and it definitely is. If we shift a day or two in a season and inconvenience ourselves a bit, that's one thing. But as you start shifting a day that now is cutting into that part of our, relevancy of economics, that changes the picture. And that's what we're here to bring forth, and what we're involved in now that's, working well.
And we've always said this was the Super Bowl of the season. How many people, when you would get your calendar for the next year, one of the first things you looked at was like, when did deer season, when did the opener fall? What day did it fall on? When was Christmas? That was it was, as Bill Jordan from Realtree, who I've had some contact with him, and they provided that video that we have on our Facebook page, the opener. Everybody if you're from Pennsylvania and you say the opener, you know what you're talking about. That's deer season, and that we are deer hunters through and through.
Yeah, and like I said, moving forward here, we hope that we can, continue to share this information with you through the podcast, that we can all come back together on this, to preserve what has been something that has been special to this state for sure over the last 60 some years. And but like I said, Dan, I don't know if is there anything else today we wanted to cover, or was this?
It's a little quiet right now, but we just had the swearing in of the governor, and we don't know who all the chairs of all the different committees. Why don't you touch upon that a little bit, Randy?
Yeah, that the current situation, the swearing in was just on the 3rd, and these committees are not formed yet. Some of them are going to be, I believe, announced tomorrow. What is today's date? I'm looking at my computer.
Today's the 5th.
5th, tomorrow, I think the 6th. I think some of this is going to be announced tomorrow. Some of these senators are going to move from committees to other committees and so forth. So we're going to have a different the structure of these House and Senate Game and Fisheries committees. I think Senator Dan Laughlin is going to shift over to vice chair, which is fine with me. He hasn't been someone that I've been particularly fond of at the last several weeks because he won't even discuss this issue. He's kind of got tunnel vision on the fact of um, his position here. That's not something I think is very endearing to him as a senator, but that's my personal opinion. But as we get these committees, as they're structured and set up here in the next few days, we're going to forward them to our coalition members, and that people need to reach out and to express their position here. I guess I could probably, Dan, there's a sporting goods store I could probably mention to people here.
Absolutely. It was my next comment because to the guy, their business is relevant to the state. They've been in Pennsylvania, their landmark store that everybody had on their must-stop list. And why don't you talk about that? He was one of the original 10 businesses that you interjected. Some of our Saturday supporters say, "Hey, show me hard facts." Well, you want to come up with $100,000 to do a survey of the businesses? Be my guest. The point is, we did do some due diligence on the first go round, and that's when I wasn't even in the picture. This was Randy. Had 10 businesses, and didn't some of the commissioners say, well, I don't hold that. Those are not relevant numbers. Well, they are relevant if you're the owner.
They were opinions. You had letters from business owners. They were opinions. Okay, they're showing us their numbers. But in an email that I just received from Tom Grace, and Tom is the largest gun store in the state of Pennsylvania. Everybody that's up in that part of the country knows who Grace's Gun Shop. Clearfield, Pennsylvania. And Tom had sent me this letter, back when we did the first 10, when I solicited 10 businesses. And I think his losses compared to the previous year were 206, or previous years with the Monday opener were $206,000 average. I just got an email back from him. I reached out to him again because I like to confirm everything I'm doing, because I've heard people, well, that was the first year. Things aren't like that anymore. Lo and behold, Tom sent me the email. Yep. The letter came back, the email came back, and it said, great, with 5 exclamation points. He said, thank God you're continuing this fight. That's his first statement. And he went to describe what it's done to his business, what it's done to the hunting. There's people that are concerned this has hurt hunting as the era of hunting. Different portions of it are destroyed, the history, and people aren't coming through the stores. And he said, and I've heard more now, he said, than before, of people that no longer like this Saturday opener. So, who am I? I'm an individual with a group with Dan, and we're painting a big picture here, obviously. But there's the largest sporting gun shop in the state of Pennsylvania. 100% is in lockstep with us, and I'm going to go back to the other several and get the comments from them, which I don't doubt are going to be any different. So, just sharing that as the last thing here, and I don't know if is that it for today, Daniel, or
just to go along with that, Randy, I just say, hey, economics, it costs people their jobs. If you don't have any business customers walking through the door, you don't need as many staff working. So
it trickles down even to some degree, probably in Pittman Robertson monies, and so forth and so on, because there was a lot of impulse buying done that weekend from all of us that had that Friday, Saturday, Sunday when we were dropping into places. But that pilgrimage of hunters that weekend from all over the state made an impact. And so when you look at the fact that, okay, if it didn't bring up license sales, if it didn't do much of anything, why not put it back? And that's kind of where we're at. Well, we could leave it at that for today.
And any other pertinent information with regards to getting this moved back to Monday. And also at that point, we'll have more legislative information as to how many co-sponsors the bill has and so on and so forth.
We'll have an actual bill number here probably within a week, and those sorts of things from Representative Smith. But anyway, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, have a nice, like Dan said, nice New Year, and we'll talk to you again at the next podcast. Take care.